Have you ever just looked at a world map and really thought about how a few pretty small nations on the western edge of Eurasia ended up, well, dominating the entire globe? The real answer is so much more fascinating than what you probably learned in history class, so let's get into it. No, really, think about it for a second. For most of human history, Europe was kinda a backwater. It wasn't the center of wealth, science, or power. And yet, starting in the 15th century, places like Portugal, Spain, Britain, they launched this incredible age of expansion that completely redrew the map and, reshaped the destiny of millions. So the big question is, how? How on earth did they pull it off? All right, to figure this out, we're going to tackle it in 5 parts. First, we'll hit the textbook answer everyone knows. Then, we're going to ask the question that almost nobody asks. We'll look at 2 totally different mindsets about how to get wealthy, unpack the brutal playbook that put one on top, and finally, see how the echoes of all this are, believe it or not, still around today. Okay, so first things first. Let's start with the classic explanation. If you've ever taken a history class, I bet you've heard about the 3 Gs. They're sort of the standard go-to answer for why Europeans started sailing all over the planet. You've got gold, which was all about the money, right? Controlling valuable stuff like the spice trade and getting access to new resources. Then there's glory, which was pure power politics. The more colonies you had, the bigger your empire looked on the map, the more powerful you were. And finally, you have God, the ideological part, this mission to spread Christianity, which, let's be honest, often served as a really convenient moral cover for conquest. But here's the thing. That popular explanation, it only tells about half the story. And this is where things get really interesting, because this is usually where the explanation just stops. But the real puzzle isn't just why Europe did expand, it's why other equally powerful, if not more powerful, civilizations didn't. I mean, this is the absolute key question, isn't it? At the time, China had these gigantic treasure fleets that absolutely dwarfed anything the Europeans had. Indian kingdoms were fabulously wealthy and had incredible shipbuilding skills. Russia was this huge, growing land empire. So if grabbing overseas colonies was such a brilliant path to power and wealth, why was it basically a uniquely European obsession? Well, when you look at their priorities, it all starts to make sense. China was this massive, self-sufficient empire. Its main concerns were keeping things stable at home and defending its enormous land borders. Sure, they had the amazing voyages of Zheng He, but that was a temporary project, not some grand strategy for world conquest. Europe, on the other hand, it was a chaotic collection of smaller, fiercely competitive states, always at each other's throats. For them, expanding overseas wasn't just a fun idea. It felt like a matter of national survival, a way to get a leg up on the guys next door. And you see a similar story elsewhere. The Indian kingdoms, they were masters of commerce and trade. Their shipbuilding was top-notch, but they used it for business, not for conquest. I mean, why risk your soldiers and your ships trying to occupy a foreign land when you can get incredibly rich just by trading with them peacefully? And Russia? Oh, it was definitely expanding, but it was going overland, east, swallowing up the vast territory of Siberia. It was a land-based empire, pure and simple, focused on its own continent. So what this all really points to is something much deeper than just different government policies. It's about 2 fundamentally different worldviews. We're talking about 2 completely different operating systems for how the world is supposed to work. And this quote just nails it. At the heart of everything is this core difference. For centuries, the entire Indian Ocean trade network ran on a simple idea. Trade is a win-win. It's about mutual benefit. The European model that showed up on their shores was the complete opposite. It saw trade as a zero-sum game, a fight for a monopoly, where the only way for you to win is for everyone else to lose. And this chart just lays it out so clearly. Look at the difference. The Indian Ocean system was built on things like mutual benefit, trust, and long-term relationships. It was an open economic mindset. The European system, it was all about monopoly, control, eliminating your rivals, and using brute military force to get what you want. We're not just talking about a difference in economics here. This is a fundamental clash of philosophies. So a big question is, how did they justify this philosophy of conquest? Well, it was often done through something we can call political religion. This is basically when the people in charge, the ruling elites, take the core ideas of a faith and kind of twist them to provide a moral justification for actions that are really about power, greed, and grabbing territory. And let's be really clear here. This is not unique to any one group. This is a universal pattern you see throughout history. Christian empires called their conquests a civilizing mission. Islamic empires used the idea of religious unity to fuel state expansion. Hindu kings used the language of dharma to justify their own political wars. And heck, today, modern states use phrases like national security. Power always, always looks for a moral cover story. So, you've got this monopoly mindset, you've got your moral justification ready to go. How did European powers actually put it into practice? Well, they followed a surprisingly methodical and pretty brutal playbook. It was basically a four-step process. Step one, you find a rich, successful trade network that's already working, like the one in the Indian Ocean. Step two, you use your military and state-sponsored pirates to just eliminate the competition, attack their ships, disrupt their business. Step three, you seize control of key ports and force local leaders into these one-sided trade deals that only benefit you. And finally, step four, you wrap the whole violent enterprise up in the noble language of bringing civilization and order. And here is the really painful truth of the matter. The very things that made that Indian Ocean trade system so successful, its openness, its reliance on trust, on mutual benefit, were the exact same things that made it so incredibly vulnerable. It was an ethical system of commerce, and it was simply not designed to defend itself against what was, essentially, a system of militarized theft. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all fascinating ancient history. But the thing is, these fundamental mindsets, these power dynamics we've been talking about, they haven't vanished. Not at all. They've just changed their clothes. The tools are different now, for sure. Instead of cannons and warships, dominant powers today might use things like financial sanctions or trade tariffs. Instead of physically occupying a country, they can exert control through huge corporate monopolies and by dominating global supply chains. The methods might be more subtle, but that underlying goal of controlling markets and boxing out the competition can look awfully familiar. Because history shows us this pattern, this cycle, over and over again. A rising power will almost always champion the cause of open markets and free trade, because that's what helps them grow. But once that power gets to the top, and especially once it starts to feel like its dominance is being threatened, the language often shifts. Suddenly, it's all about protectionism, nationalism, and controlled markets. It's a timeless story of how power tries to protect itself. Which leaves us with this final, really challenging question. What we've seen is that a system based purely on ethics and trust can be tragically exploited. But we've also seen very clearly that power without a strong ethical compass inevitably becomes predatory and destructive. So the real challenge is, where do you find the balance? That struggle isn't just a history lesson. It's one of the biggest questions we're all still trying to figure out in the world today.